Human design is a part science, part spiritual system that tells you who you came here to be. You have your own blueprint, your own way of becoming successful, your own way your dreams are going to come true, the way you'll experience the most joy and fulfillment. The instruction manual for how to move through the world is custom to you. When you act according to that manual, when you act as the real you, everything in life comes to you with more ease and less resistance. We all know we're different, yet we're still acting like there's one way to do life. Let's talk about it. To find out your design and the designs of the people in your life, you can visit myhumandesign.com or download the My Human Design app in the App Store and on Google Play. I want to address this wild time that we're all in right now, because a lot of us are feeling like we are in this weird in-between that is at the same time so eerily kind of nothing is happening, but everything is happening. And we've all had a lot of stuff being removed or kicked out from our lives. And we also have this sense of something big is coming. And actually, that's kind of the way that it's supposed to happen, right? Like the universe prepares us for the next stage of our lives by, putting us through the trials. And why I love human design more than any other reason why I love human design is because it gives you the way out. It gives you the way to the thing. And imagine if you go back all the way to, primitive man, our bodies, our charts looked very different. We didn't have 9 centers. We've become more complex as we have had the process of evolution. So back then, imagine this, there was no other authority in any human being aside from the spleen. And the spleen is the part of us that governs instinct and fears and survival. And so the spleen made us much more similar to animals, where, animals have that sixth sense, right? Where if a tsunami is coming, they fly before it comes. They know that when they feel sick, even dogs now, if you have a pet, they'll go and fast if they feel not well, or they'll eat grass if they feel like they need to throw up. So imagine that they're doing that anyway without having a mind that's really kind of understanding that that process is in place. So they're just doing it because it feels being the operative word, the most natural, obvious thing to them. Now, because we're humans, we've been given a lot more guidance and different kinds of energies within us to play with so that we can, transform, and so that we can manifest incredible things in this world and go through the type of transformation that, for example, an animal could never have. However, where it has sort of gotten in the way, and this is what we are so addicted to now, is our thoughts and this belief that thinking is the thing that's going to get us out of the conundrum. And you could think back at your life and say, look, thinking has kind of brought me this far and it's kind of worked, but most of us are sensing that there's probably something else that's deeper down that could, suit us a little more. And we have to think back to those animals. We have to think that they're not even choosing to either be guided by the universe, the mystical force within, or whether to be listening to their mind and thinking their way out of problems. They just listen to the mystical way because it feels like them. And this is where I think we need to change our consciousness a little bit, because we've kind of sort of placed out this mystical energy, this mystical loving force of the universe. We've put it up in the sky, when really, because we are a fragment of God, it is a part of us, and not because we're special and not because of anything, but just because we literally are half human, half this weird etheric thing that no one can really understand. So the half weird etheric thing we should start listening to. And I think it's really helpful to take God off a pedestal in a way, and to realize like, oh, God only, on one level of truth, God only really exists because we are here and because we are expressing it. It only exists in our world because we are doing the machinations of what it wants to be expressing and painting on this canvas, and we are its ambassadors. So this is the invitation of human design, is instead of using thoughts, but maybe different ones to get you out of your conundrum, can you understand that there is a different part of you that the mind has no veto over? The mind cannot try to compute because it's so much bigger than the mind, and it comes through each one of us via a place, right? So if you're emotional authority, it comes to you through your feelings. If you're sacral authority, it comes to you through that gut, that excitement, the thing that lights you up. If you're splenic authority, it is that go do this, which might be preparing you for, having gone to the store early so you avoided seeing someone that you didn't need to see, or God knows what, and so on and so forth with all the authorities. And I really encourage you to check yours in the app. Also in the app, we have so many tips on how each authority can be applied to basically every life situation. So if you want to learn how to use your spleen for packing, it's in there. If you want to use your emotional authority for changing jobs, it's in there. We go in so deep. And this is why they really say that the authority piece and the strategy piece, which is listening to your energy type, those two things really change your life, because what it does is it's not buying into the system that we think works and then trying to hack the system. It's actually transcending the system. It's going above the system. And so it's really interesting to notice this mental pressure that so many of us have, that we want to say, how do I get from A to B right now? And we're all feeling it. We all really, really how do I transition to this thing? How do I change the job? How do I make that move? How do I, believe that this thing is possible? How do I have certainty? People ask me that all the time. And all of that is coming from the mind's addiction to know exactly how it's going to pan out, in order to feel safe enough to then construct this whole logical, to us individually, system around what we're going to do in order to justify it, in order to feel like it's okay. Because our two biggest questions of life are always, am I okay? And is it going to be okay? And all of that mind chatter and addiction is just trying to soothe the answer to those two questions, where actually the whole jig is that life has not brought us here to pontificate over those two questions. Life has brought us here to have those deep questions inside of us, and then by us listening and taking a risk on that unknown, mystical, ineffable thing, to actually prove to ourselves that we are okay, and to prove to ourselves that we are good at making things okay even when they are not the best situations. We wouldn't know that deep in our bones if we sat and philosophized about it. And so I think right now what I'm feeling is that so many of us are we're struggling, right? And so we're thinking that the solution is to go even deeper into more thinking. And I want to give you this invitation that even if you want to keep the thinking for now, that's totally cool. But just practice at a pace that feels good for you on the size things that feel safe enough for you to do, to listen to your authority and just start flexing that muscle. Even whilst you keep the mind, you will have that space to start creating evidence that the authority actually does come through for you. And then it feels like less of a risky leap the day that you do decide to hand more things over to your authority. And I want to say that I'm not sitting here saying that I don't use my mind, and I'm not sitting here saying it is absolutely the daily challenge. It is the daily thing that contends with us, because not only do we have years of using our minds, and so it just is the road more traveled, but also that we're in a world where we're swimming in the fact that everyone is operating underneath that mind thing. And so It's imagine like you're blue, but you see everything else around you pink. Trying to stay blue is freaking tough. And sometimes, most of the time, actually, we are purple. We are going to be purple, just different shades, and we'll get more and more towards that blue as time goes on. But the goal is not to be perfectly blue, because the hope is that obviously as every day that you're alive, there's always more room to expand, because otherwise, there's no excitement. There's no more how else can it get better? How else can I be better? Who can I become? How can I become surprised and delighted at what life has to offer me if I change my insides? And so you don't need to wait to be perfectly purple to see incredible rewards. And especially now, because I talk about this a lot in the New Paradigm series in the app, but the gaps between cause and effect are being so obviously shown to us now, where everything you do, you can see what it creates come back to you so much more quickly. And so the universe rewards the brave, and the universe rewards every single time you stop in your tracks of that thinking, and go, hold on a second. What actually excites me out of these two things? Or the opposite question of that for sacral authority people, which is like, which one would I secretly be relieved to not have to do? And even if you can't act on it just yet, just the simple act of you interrupting that pattern is going to be rewarded. And this is why, we say strategy and authority, and it does sound boring, but the process of changing your life is quote unquote boring because it's hidden in the mundane. The magic is in the mundane. And we see so much spiritual conditioning that it's supposed to be one ayahuasca ceremony and you're fixed, or one spiritual awakening. And then what? Someone asked me the other day, how do I know if I'm going through a spiritual awakening and what happens on the other side? And again, it's like the thinking, like, what is it? How do I define it? And it's that thinking of, I will take the temporary struggle if I know that after that I can breathe forever. And there has to be this acceptance of, you can breathe in periods, and you have to teach yourself also to breathe in the challenges, and you will get stronger at breathing in the challenges. So a spiritual awakening, I hope for all of us that we're always going through a constant spiritual awakening. I hope spiritual ahas and guidance from the universe is not a one and done thing. I hope it's a presence that continues to become ever more present in each of our lives, because we have invited it in more and more and learned to rely on it more and more. So really this whole thing is to say that there is so much magic that you will unlock that will shock you, that you feel you didn't even do, just because you honored the mystical guidance in you and allowed the mind to, just not be involved in that side of things. And the mind is always going to try and encroach, because the mind loves the control, and the mind loves the understanding, and the mind loves being clever and being smart and feeling smart. And that's great. It's just that it's not supposed to be smart about the mystical stuff, because the mystical stuff it's not that level of intelligence. It is not the understanding and the minding and the thinking and the sort of 5 rules of this, and this always works, and how much protein and masculine, feminine. I know I bang on about those two things, but because they're so topical, but there is something else that is underneath it. We talked about this in our episode that we did about the mystery of a woman's cycle, that there's obviously so many things we want to think the solution to a good cycle is: the hormones, the fasting, the right foods and all this and that. But that also there are such other ineffable forces that come to that. And if you can think about the miracle of birth, it's easy to understand that it's more than just, a sperm and an egg. Like, there's a point at which the mystical force kind of jumps in, right? And implants itself in there. And what we need to think about, if it's helpful, is that happens at every point in your life. Is like, yes, the cogs are happening, and then the mystical force comes in. And the mystical force does not come from the heavens. The mystical force comes through you, because that is the only way to ensure that it would always be in you. It will always be with you, you know? It makes me think of that. I haven't seen Star Wars, but isn't it the Force is in you? At the end of the day, the Force, he had the Force. So I don't know. I mean, it's in every fictional thing, is that the magic is within the person, and they didn't recognize it because they were going out on some quest to find it in a, you know, a crown or a scepter or a crystal or another person. And so there's a reason why those things are written. There's a reason why we are living in a time where we have all the answers available to us through myth, through story, through other people, through social media, things that are smack bang in our face, through this quickening up of cause and effect. And yet, because of this incredible access to information, the challenge now is that we apply ourselves more. Like, think about a person who lived 200 years ago, what they would have killed to get the level of sort of knowledge and wisdom that we have access to. But because we are swimming in it, we get lazy and we are distracted because we think that the knowledge and the wisdom is the consuming of it and the constructing of it that we do in our heads is the answer. And the construction of it is helpful to a certain degree, but for your making your life moves, like that stuff that we're all wanting to do right now, we have to start even on the tiniest things, like what time you want to wake up in the morning, you know, even if everyone tells you you have to wake up with the sunlight. You know, I dance in the morning because I've decided that for me personally, what's more important as a priority is that I feel joy in the mornings when I wake up. And that comes over, you know, whatever other thing I think I have to be doing workout wise or whatever else I have to be doing, and meditation or other things. And I can say that without yucking someone else's yums. You know, that's really the other thing about human design, is that you really learn to honor the divine has 8 billion different voices. And so who am I to say that my divinity is better than your divinity? It's absolutely not. It's just that the universe has so much color in it that it wants to shine in so many different colors. And so it needs more people to be able to do that with.
I want to point us back to something you said earlier on about how the spleen was the very first authority center. And correct me if I'm saying that wrong. And how, yes, humans have evolved in our mental intelligence. Like we have gained so much mental knowledge, but we forget that as our mental knowledge evolved, our actual other areas of intelligence evolved too, right? So those other centers that can be authorities, animals don't have those. We developed that additional, I would call it intelligence, but what would you call it, right? Can you kind of walk us through the fact that we can have an ego authority? An animal can't have that. That is a form of intelligence that we're not tapping into.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. All animals are splenic. So we have 7 different kinds of ways that we can be guided. And that has happened over the course of the development. And so, you know how we talk about the arrows in your chart. If you look at your chart, there are 4 different arrows around your head. And those arrows for all human beings used to only be able to point to the left before. And that's what we call a quad left. Those are people who are consistent, disciplined, specific, and motivated, right? And what happened when the brain developed a prefrontal cortex and a neocortex, the ability for humans to think in different ways opened up the possibility of then us being able to have emotions enter the chat and for all of these different systems to be able to play together. And that is what makes us so interesting, is that, you know, we do have different forms of yeah, there's a mental intelligence, there's emotional intelligence. That one is something we know, and there's also instinctive intelligence. There's gut intelligence. We're starting to talk about these things, and human design is really the one that sort of brings all this stuff together. Like, you can go to the gut person who will tell you about that. You can go to the emotional, IQ person that will tell you about that, and it's really sort of the umbrella that's saying there's so many more as well. And actually, don't spend your don't invest your time, or maybe you don't have to invest your time learning so much about this other thing if actually yours is the other way around. It's funny. Um, I have talked to all of the members of my family about their design to different extents. And my father never asked me until last week, and he's a projector. And I spoke to him about being splenic. And he sort of said, yeah, I feel like I've never had a gut, you know? And you can feel it in people. You can feel a different, once you get to know people, you can sense how they work. And one of the things that's so great is because you can understand and trust, if you can, that we live in a win-win-win universe. I want everybody in my life to listen to their authority rather than impose mine on them, because I know for a fact that even if my brain is running through all the checks, well, if this, then one, then two, then three, then four, and I'm then trying to force that person to make the decision that I think is going to fit that sequence, it's going to make me be okay and in control and feel fine again. Weirdly enough, when I encourage them to make the decision according to their authority, I know I'm going to benefit. Now, also, there's obviously, you get to read the room in the sense that there are some people you can encourage them to do that, and there's a little bit of their own mind interference or their own fears in there or whatever. So it's not a one and done. But really, magic starts to happen when you encourage your people to live their design, and you genuinely get such benefits from seeing that you can't necessarily calculate. It's not that every time it's like, oh my God, it's like even better than your mind could ever, but it's like, oh, whoa, I couldn't even realize that was the way it was going to work out. And also your relationships with them become so much better because they become happier people. They feel like they trust themselves more. They're not doing all this running around, personaing, fronting, controlling you. So it's you can literally do that in any dynamic you have currently to an extent, right? You can honor their individual way rather than try and either make their decisions for them or save the day. Tell them how they make decisions and encourage them to do that. And then you can also just, not try to control the outcome. And then you really do see that they're just better human beings and they're better towards you. So it really does, just everything that we do right now in terms of consciousness and living in an aligned way, which is what human design gives you, your specific roadmap for how you get aligned, is going to get so rewarded. And I think that's why I felt so called to talk about this now, because we really are in this sort of chrysalis before we become butterflies. And yet it's going to feel darkest before the dawn. There's going to feel like there's chaos everywhere. And that's because, there is a magnification of everything that is happening in the consciousness of the world. And so, there are going to be people who it's going to look, because the universe is going to set up the test that way. It's going to look like maybe you can't make it, but everyone else around you is this, and the world is so whatever and whatever. And what we have to do with that is not ignore it. We have to say, I see this, and I recognize that this makes it even more my duty to be a good ambassador for the light.
And you talk about how when you let other people make decisions with their authority, your authority is taking in a lot more data points than our brains could ever conceive of. For example, earlier this month, I was supposed to drive to San Diego with my dog. I wanted to bring my dog with us for the 4th of July. And 2 days before, I was just getting my spleen. It was just screaming at me not to drive to San Diego. And I'm now at the point where I don't question that, and I just act upon it. So I completely changed my entire plan. Instead, only drove to Phoenix and dropped my dog off to my mom and flew to San Diego. And we had a car there because we have a home there. And my husband's mom actually ended up in the hospital, and we couldn't get on a plane fast enough. So we had to get in that car and drive from San Diego all the way to Phoenix. And the next time I drove my car after we lost her, after everything, the next time I drove my car, it broke down. So if I would have, like, I could never have, predicted that, but my spleen just knew all the different data points that I could never conceive of with my mind. So it just helps kind of like cut through the things that your mind could never cut through.
Yeah. It puts you at the right place at the right time. And we talked about that. I think it was last week. We talked about how, you know, your soul's journey is physically mapped out. Where would I find, if I was looking from above, where would I find Taylor? How would I know if it was Taylor? The main way of identifying you is where you physically are at. And that's where the rubber meets the road of the mystical to the physical, is like in your daily life. So what's around you? What synchronicities and opportunities can actually play out in this setup, in the set of the specific stage you're on right now? If you're on the wrong stage, maybe a certain synchronicity, certain lining up of timing, certain anything can't come to you. You can't bump into the person. We know this, but we sometimes think, again, the thinking, that things are somehow woo and out there, where it's like, actually, spirituality is here. It is here. It is right here. And that's where we can listen to the sometimes so shockingly boring guidance that is the most unboring force in the world in disguise.